Compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning, as I am every morning. And we are going to address a number of topics this morning. We're going to start out with the unparalleled and ridiculously stupid statement that Kerry, that would be our U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, made relating to the one week ultimatum that he has given Assad in terms of turning in chemical weapons. This statement was the height of hubris and was absolutely stupid to make. The real issue here is that we've got John Kerry out there writing checks with his parakeet mouth that our alligator tail is going to have to cash. And, you know, the problem with that is that he's speaking for the nation, and yet he's actually outside the scope of what he's supposed to be talking about in terms of even the presidency. I mean, here's a guy who's making brash statements like that, which are, you know, here in Missouri, we call them's fightin' words, right? So my problem with this guy is that, one, he makes statements that the president later on turns around and says, hey, we're not going to do that. And secondarily, you know, making a brash ultimatum like you have 1 week to turn over your entire chemical weapons arsenal, first and foremost, is unlikely to happen. In fact, it's not unlikely. It's the odds of that happening are so astronomical that, you know, we have a better chance of launching an intergalactic spaceship next Monday before Bashar al-Assad turns over his chemical weapons to us. And so what he's done is essentially, again, double layered the paint that's put us in this corner in the first place. And we're going to look at that and evaluate what and why he would say such a thing. Our second issue is going to be climate change. And we're going to talk about the fraud of climate change because I think it's important that America as a nation and the world understand that this issue of climate change has been debunked on a number of levels. But more importantly, it is also now exposed as the fraud that it is on a national basis. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. For the record, the ice cap in the Arctic has grown by 60%, folks. So the idea of global warming is passé, to say the least. What we're really going to look at is why science has turned from a fact-based system to one of political expedience and political benefit, where these politicians have scientists in their pocket who will pretty much say whatever they want to say. What it's really about with climate change is sucking more wealth out of the pockets and the hands of the global populace, the peasants, if you will, into the pockets of the elitists. And we're going to talk a little bit about how and why. Our third segment is the not surprising news that as of the beginning here of 2014, we are now going to see 31 million people left uninsured under Obamacare. Now, if you recall, the original argument for Obamacare was that we were going to have 30 million people in the nation that were uninsured, and that was unacceptable, and we had to create this massive plan that would insure those 30 million people. Now the word is out that it's actually going to leave 31 million uninsured, and I want to point out to you that this isn't about insuring anyone. It's about asserting control over the entire population. It's about building dossiers on Americans. It's about financial and political data that they can throw into your dossier and build an information database on every single American. Why? because this administration has now accomplished what no administration previously has been able to do. And that's check the missing box on the Marxist political platform that says, in order to control a nation, you must have total control of their healthcare system. And this guy's done it. Our fourth segment is going to be Fast and Furious. Chris Wallace had an interview with the president's chief of staff yesterday, and he asked a flat-out question. Where are the Benghazi arrests? I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to say Fast and Furious. I meant Benghazi. Where are the arrests in Benghazi? And it's a legitimate question, folks. I mean, here it's been a year, and we haven't seen a single arrest. And to make matters worse, the one charge that they have actually levied against an individual was an individual in Benghazi, and the guy has been interviewed by a host of different news organizations, and yet they've never arrested him. They haven't even filed paperwork with the nation to actually have the guy extradited. So the question remains: what exactly is it that this nation cannot know about Benghazi and the truth surrounding that? I suspect, and I've long couched this as the reason, the problem here is that they cannot have the truth exposed about Benghazi because it directly ties into Syria, and this was really all about a weapons deal. Another Fast and Furious, but on a massive international scale that dwarfs what happened in the border states in Mexico with the Fast and Furious project that was originally outlined and created by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, a.k.a. F-Troop. So, all right, let's start on our Syrian crisis issue. We've got about 15 minutes, and I want to get everything out here in the open. Secretary of State John Kerry, who I will hereinafter refer to as Franken Kerry, has given an ultimatum to the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. In order to avoid in order to avoid a military strike, he must turn over his entire chemical weapons arsenal to the international community within a week. Now, he did this in a joint press conference with the foreign secretary from the UK, and which is interesting because the UK has already stated emphatically and empirically that they will not participate. And so I'm not quite sure what the purpose of that support was. I guess he was just there for moral support. I don't get it. But, the incompetence and the ineptitude of these people is actually stunning. That we have a nation, in fact, a world, that is being run by these, and I mean these people are truly idiots. Here's the problem. You've got a guy like Kerry out here who's making statements that the president himself won't back up. And he's doing it on a national stage in front of the world on an international issue where he's actually committing us to a war. And he's committing us to a war by saying, if we don't have your entire chemical weapons stock turned over to the international community within a week, we're coming for you. The real problem here is that what he's essentially done is backed out of any opportunity for the United States to step away from the brink here, and he's doubled down on a bad bet. I mean, the dealer's holding 21, and he knows it, and the idiot doubles down. It's stupid. And then he makes an even worse statement. He promises that this is going to be a short step and that it's going to be an amazingly short, I believe, and I'm going to find the exact quote for you because, I mean, it's so arrogant and stupid to say that. Let me find you the exact statement he made. Military effort will be targeted and short-term. So, okay. The guy is talking out of both sides of his mouth in literally 2 sentences. If you want to send Assad a congratulatory message, you would support non-intervention. But that's not what we are talking about. Military effort will be targeted and short-term. And then he states that it will be unbelievably small and a limited effort. All right. So here you are telling him that he's got 1 week to turn over his chemical weapons, or you're going to pimp slap him. I mean, to me, the idea of making that kind of a statement, first of all, it's fiery rhetoric that's fighting words. And the idea of making that statement and then turning around and saying, and if you don't do it, I'm going to give you such a pinch, is absolutely ridiculous. Let's not forget who John Kerry is. John Kerry is, first of all, he's really here as payback by the Obama administration for support. So let's understand something. No matter what else comes out of this conversation this morning, I want you to recognize one thing. This tells you everything that you need to know about party politics and why party politics is the downfall of America. Because John Kerry's not in there because he's qualified. John Kerry's in there because he supported this president in initiatives that he knew were unpopular and undoable, and he supported it anyway. He helped him with health care. He helped him with this anti-gun stuff. He's helped him with Fast and Furious and hiding the truth. And the truth of the matter is, John Kerry is so inept that he could not have qualified for this job based on his actual true qualifications and his skills and experience. I mean, who would have thought that John Kerry would be the strong man of the National Security Council representing the United States of America on an international basis? This is the same guy who had to attend political classes from the North Vietnamese and memorize and repeat the accusations that they made against the United States of America and against his fellow soldiers and his countrymen about war crimes. Then, when he ran for president in 2004, he asserted that while he had voted to invade Iraq in 2003, he couldn't possibly be held accountable for that statement because he didn't vote to fund the invasion once it had already begun. So, in other words, what he said was, I'm going to support this thing and I'm going to vote that we go. But once the vote comes up to spend money on it, I'm not going to support that. I was for it before I was against it. I got to tell you, John Kerry is such a pathetic and disgraceful human being. I wouldn't let John Kerry sit my dog for a weekend, much less negotiate our way through a global crisis on the opening gambit of World War III. I mean, really. This guy is so inept, and how he got to be Secretary of State was political payback not only for him, but everyone in Congress who assented to that. Everyone in the Senate who approved of his appointment should be dragged out and charged with malfeasance in office, because they know who John Kerry is. He's been in there a long, long time as a senator. Now, he's turned around and said to us and the world, you got 1 week to turn in your missiles. And if you don't, we're going to give you such a pinch. Then he turns around and he says, and this is his statement, but he is not about to do that, and it cannot be done. So then why would you make the statement then? In other words, this is like walking up to a total stranger on the street who's the big, this reminds me of the little guy in the bar who walks up to the big guy, the biggest guy in the bar, and he says, you know what? Your mother is ugly. She wears combat boots. I'm not even going to say the word. I mean, just rambling off blatant insults in an attempt to get the guy to fight. That's what this is. There is no other way that you can explain what Kerry has just done here. And then he turns around and says, if he doesn't, we're going to launch an unbelievably small and limited effort. Those are his words, folks. Unbelievably small and limited effort to punish Assad. Military effort will be targeted and short term. I mean, the argument itself is so nonsensical that I cannot believe that a rational adult would actually come out with with a statement like that. He gives Bashar al-Assad one last chance. Turn in your chemical weapons or else. And the or else turns out to be a pimp slap against against the guy who's wearing body armor. This is so insulting. Every American should be insulted by this guy representing us. You know what this reminds me of? You're in court. You're pleading and fighting for your life. And your attorney is standing up there admitting, when you've pled not guilty, that his client may actually be guilty. And when you go to stand up to defend yourself, the judge says to you, sit down, and if you don't sit down, I'll have you removed from the court. But my attorney's incompetent. Doesn't matter, sit down. But he's not saying the right thing. Doesn't matter, sit down. You see, what we are caught up in now is a situation where we have a representative representing us before the world who doesn't represent us. He is antithetical to the views of the United States. He's antithetical to the views of the vast majority of people who have talked about this specific issue. I mean, there's a CNN poll out there right now that only 27% are for this, 73% against, which is the most, or the poll that I've seen that offers actually the highest level of support for it. Every other poll I've seen has been less than 20. So here you got a guy who's representing us, who doesn't actually represent us. He's making statements that are enforcing a situation that's already so far out of control that we're not really sure we can back out of it at this point. And this guy is going to go out there and now kick the biggest guy in the shin in an effort to get him to swing. I mean, I can't think of a more abusive example of abusive power. I mean, I hate to use a double word. This is such an abuse of power that every American should be outraged. And really, folks, let's understand what this is about. This has absolutely nothing to do with Bashar al-Assad killing somewhere between 500 and this administration's blown-up figure of 1,400. I've been talking to you about the real issue here, and I've been posting stuff up on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and on our website about the real true issues here. The real reason we are going to war with Syria is not because Bashar al-Assad has killed 400 or 1,400. The real reason we're going to war here is because we are being used as mercenaries in an international conflict that we have no place in. We are being hired as contractors by a number of groups, not the least of which is OPEC, not the least of which is Saudi Arabia, who's actually offered to pay for the war publicly, and Kerry came out and admitted that. Not the least of which is Israel, who would like nothing better than us to fight their battle. Not to mention the entire world would like to get rid of Iran, with the exception of a couple of limited countries. And that's what this really is about. These knuckleheads are praying Iran will step in to defend their partner, Assad. And when they do, they will then have the provocation they need to be able to go after Iran. That's what this is really about. That's why Saudi Arabia is willing to fund it. That's why Israel is pouring millions upon millions of dollars into the pockets and the campaign re-election systems and funds of everyone in Congress. They are lobbying their tails off. Yes, Israel. You know, I'm a supporter of Israel, and I'm a supporter of the United States' alignment with Israel as a partner. And I'm even in support of our backing their play, militarily and politically in certain areas. But this reminds me of the little guy who's got a big friend behind him who's a bully. And he walks over to his worst enemy and picks a fight because he's got the big guy behind him to back him up. Something he couldn't do alone. And I don't like being played by Israel because of our relationship with them. I resent it. I'm insulted by it. And I'll be doggoned if we're going to go over there and put our blood of our youth and the treasure of our nation to solve a problem for Israel that hasn't actually occurred. Much less with the veil pulled over it of this is really all about chemical weapons and Assad, when in fact it's really not. It's all about making sure that Israel is protected from Iran. I got to ask the obvious question. The 400 people that were killed are 400 out of 200,000 that are dead. Do you think the 400 really care whether they died from gas or whether they died from a bomb or whether they died from a bullet? I hardly think so. Dead is dead. This is nothing more than a veiled excuse for the provocation of more war. And I resent it. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can follow us at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. And then you can also catch this and every other episode at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. If you're watching us live on the web, just hang on a moment. We'll be right back.